I have pressed record. You're good to go.
Okay. Have you ever borrowed someone's items without asking? If so, was the person okay with it, or did you guys end up fighting? You should care about the importance of asking before you borrow someone's items because it could avoid an unnecessary conflict. My name is Chloe Watson, and I am an Intro to Communication student at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. Today, I'm going to tell you about a conflict between me and my sister over her borrowing a shirt of mine without permission. First, I will give you the case background of my conflict. Then, I will share I will share the communication principle and two concepts connected to my story. And finally, I will provide recommendations for how I can improve my communication. Let's begin with my case background. My case background is a story that happened between myself and my sister over a shirt. Have you ever fought with your siblings over clothing? My sister and I have never really gotten along. She's 5 years older than me, and we are totally opposites when it comes to everything except clothes, which wasn't really an issue until my sophomore year when her and I were able to wear the same clothes. One weekend during the fall of my junior year, my sister came home from college to visit. She showed up on Friday, and her plan was to leave early Sunday like she usually did. I was planning on going on a first date that Saturday. My sister was going to be in town and bought a shirt the weekend before from American Eagle for the event. Since the date was scheduled for Saturday, I left it on the back of my door and just didn't really think about it. On Friday after school, I went straight to the basketball game because I was a cheerleader. It was an away game, so we didn't get back till late that night. As soon as I got home, I crashed on the couch and didn't think about the shirt at all. I woke up the next morning at 10:30 and noticed that the shirt was not on the back of my door. I immediately called my sister, and she didn't answer. I was like, okay. So then I called her again, and she still didn't answer. The third time, she finally answered, and her voice was muffled. You could tell I woke her up. And I loud and angrily asked if she was wearing the shirt. She told me to lower my voice, and I said no, and then she hung up on me. Of course, this made me mad, and then she texted me and said, I will talk to you once you calm down. So I finally chilled out and called her back in a calmer tone and asked her if she was wearing the shirt. She said yes. I told her what the shirt was for, and she was very apologetic and asked if I wanted her to buy me a new one. I told her no, but from now on, we need to make sure that we ask before we borrow each other's clothes. I told I hung up the phone and went to the gym as planned. After the gym, I planned on going to the mall and buying the same shirt anyways, but while I was at the gym, my sister sent me a picture of a shopping bag. Turns out she went ahead and bought the same shirt for me because she knew how much the date meant. I, of course, thanked her and apologized for yelling at her over it. I was very thankful we could resolve our issue, and I wish I would have just approached her calmly in the first place. My sister has never worn any of my clothes without asking again, and I have had the same respect for her in return. I feel like the conflict was small, but it made a lasting impact on our relationship. We now have more respect for each other's personal things. Now that I've given you the case background, I will next be sharing a communication principle and two communication concepts connected to my story. Do you ever have a hard time holding yourself accountable for your actions at times? The relevant communication principle I chose is messages reveal and impact the nature of the relationship between the communicators. The definition, according to the UALR Survival Guide, is every message, verbal and nonverbal, we interpret influences in some way how we see the relationship with the other person. An example from my story illustrates this principle is when my first response was to yell at my sister. This example illustrates my example illustrates the principle because it reveals the relationship between me and my sister can be very aggressive at times. The next concept I chose is compromise. The definition, according to the university, the first communication concept is compromise. The definition, according to the University of Minnesota Libraries Publishing 2019, is compromising is the conflict management style that shows a moderate concern for self and others and may indicate that there is a low investment in the conflict or relationship. An example from my story illustrates this concept is at the end of the conflict when we agreed not to wear each other's things anymore without asking. My example illustrates this definition because we came to an agreement and it resulted in conflict resolution. The second communication concept is informative listening. The definition, according to the University of the Minnesota's Library Publishing 2019 of informative listening, entails listening with the goal of comprehending and retaining information. An example from my story that illustrates this concept is when my sister was listening when I was expressing what the shirt was for and the importance of her asking me for my permission to wear my things. My example illustrates this definition because she was listening with the goal of comprehending my feelings and boundaries. Finally, I will provide recommendations for how I can improve my communication. Based on my experience, I can use communication concepts and ethical implications to improve my communication and help my interpersonal relationships. You should care about this because it may help you with your interpersonal communication. One communication concept I could use to improve communication would be conscious competence. The definition, according to the University of Minnesota's Library Publishing 2019, is meaning that you are communicating well in the moment, which will add to your bank of experiences in the future. I chose this concept based on my experience because I knew in the moment that I was not communicating well. If I would have practiced conscious competence, then my sister and I would more than likely have resolved our conflict without arguing at all. I can use this concept to improve my communication by consciously choosing to communicate well. Next is an ethical implication I could use to improve my interpersonal relationship, and I chose responsibility. The definition, according to the ALR Survival Guide of Responsibility, is holding ourselves accountable for our choices, actions, and communications with others. I chose this implication based on my story because after I had to recognize the fact that I might have blown things out of proportion. I can use this implication to improve my interpersonal relationships by trying to control my emotions and hold myself accountable during the situation instead of after. In conclusion, I've told you about a conflict between me and my sister over her borrowing a shirt of mine. First, I gave you the case background of my conflict. Then I shared the communication principle and two concepts connected to my story. And lastly, provided you with recommendations for how I can improve my communication. I will leave you with take my advice and simply just ask before you borrow anything from anyone. End scene. Oh, so terrible.